Chapter 1: The Calculated Calm. The air in the city's edge veterinary clinic smelled like antiseptic and old dog biscuits, a familiar, comforting blend of science and animal life. Jada Moreno didn't notice the smells anymore. Her focus was on the Labrador, Leo, trembling violently on the stainless steel exam table. Leo hadn't been hit by a car, he'd been spooked by something on the docks, his owner claimed, but his fear was bone deep, his muscles twitching like taut wires. "Easy, Leo," Jada murmured, her voice a low, steady instrument, the only thing that could cut through the dog's panic. This was her core strength, her unflappable, selfless, and instinctively nurturing nature. She applied a sterile gauze to a minor scrape on his flank, her touch firm but gentle. No matter how hard she tried to keep her mind on Leo, the glowing red numbers on the invoice pad waiting on her desk were a persistent, anxious hum beneath her skin. Truth be told, the clinic was always just 3 unexpected equipment failures away from closing. Her assistant, Marcus, a gentle giant built like a rugby player, leaned against the doorframe, chewing his lip. "The new infusion pump payment is due next week, document. Are we okay?" Jada sealed the gauze bandage with an efficient, quick motion. "We're fine, Marcus. We always make it work because we stick to the budget and we maintain control of our overhead." Her response was rote, a mantra she repeated daily to silence the constant fear that lived in her chest. In the span of a breath, she moved from soothing the dog to shutting down the worry. Maybe it was fate, or maybe just survival instinct, but she relied rigidly on professional boundaries and scientific reasoning, believing control is safety, and emotion leads to mistakes. She had learned that lesson the hard way in her past, and she wouldn't repeat it, because her daughter, Lila, deserved absolute stability. Still, Marcus's worried frown hinted at something deeper than just finances. "The weather reports, document. They're predicting a storm like we haven't seen. Category 3 winds hitting inland. Maybe we should close early, just for Lila?" Jada looked out the clinic's thick glass window at the sky. It was a bruise-colored gray, thick and unnatural, even for the city. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of being unprepared for a natural disaster, or the financial loss of closing the clinic early. Not only that, but disrupting Lila's routine felt like a failure of her primary initial goal, maintain stability and solvency. "We will close when the final patient is stable, Marcus," Jada said firmly, her voice allowing no argument. "The city always exaggerates. We are not panicking." As the wind shifted, she thought she heard a sound, not the screech of traffic, but something deep, primal, and too loud for a city street. She felt it, clear as day, a strange, cold tension in the back of her neck, a warning her scientific mind immediately dismissed as stress. Meanwhile, outside the city limits, Alpha King Ronan was moving swiftly through the hidden pathways, wounded but alive, his ancient, poisoned heart hammering against his ribs. Chapter 2: The Weight of the Crown. Ronan Varen felt the poison eating him from the inside out. It was a searing, chemical burn that his shifter healing factor was fighting and losing to, because the venom was magically crafted to specifically target the alpha bloodline. Beneath the moonlight that was barely visible through the thick clouds, he shifted his weight, his human form still imposing but rigid with internal pain. He was hiding in the derelict shell of an abandoned subway station, part of the hidden Werewolf world's infrastructure, where concrete met the ancient earth. A dark figure detached itself from the shadows, stumbling slightly. It was Tyran, Ronan's most trusted intelligence officer. Tyran was bleeding from a severe gash on his arm. "My king. You shouldn't be here." "It's too dangerous," Tyran whispered, his voice hoarse, thick with loyalty and fear. Ronan looked at the wound. It was healing, but too slowly. "The venom is slow, Tyran, but potent. It will cripple me before it kills me." "What did you find?" Tyran hesitated, glancing around as if the concrete itself had ears. "It was the Elder Council. Specifically, borean. He sourced the poison months ago. He said your reign had grown too isolated, too much like a tyrant. To make things worse, he framed it as purifying the bloodline. Ronan felt the blow not in his body, but in the center of his chest. Borean. A sworn mentor. Deep down, he knew the truth, his ruthless isolation, his belief that the weight of the crown demanded total secrecy and distrust, had created this monster. He needed absolute loyalty and unbreakable will to rule, but those very traits had choked out all love and trust. Borean, Ronan repeated, the name a cold stone on his tongue. He took my son. No, my king. He believes you still have the heir. But Borean knows about the child's unique immunity. He knows the pup must be eliminated to make his claim viable, Tyran explained, his voice catching with grief. This was a major open loop. What is the child's unique immunity, and why does the assassin need to eliminate the pup specifically? This confirmed that the pup was a primary target. On the other hand, this betrayal provided a small, desperate piece of luck. Borean thought Ronan was still in the main pack territory, trying to find his son. Ronan had used the cover of the storm to flee, creating distance and confusion. Because of that, the city's shifter population was currently distracted, looking in the wrong places. I need to disappear entirely, Ronan commanded, his eyes the color of molten gold in the gloom. You will spread the rumor that I died in the ambush. You will tell them the heir is lost, forcing Borean to show his hand. This is the only way to save my son, because Borean hunts the king, not a ghost. Tyran bowed, grief etching deep lines around his eyes. What followed was a quick, efficient exchange of code words and emergency contacts, a lifeline thrown into a vast, dark ocean. Ronan gave his final command, do not contact me again, Tyran. Not until I send word. With every step he took away from the loyal beta, Ronan felt the political burden lift, only to be replaced by the raw, consuming burden of a father hunting his lost child. The storm was coming, and he needed a place where no one, shifter or human, would ever look for a king. Chapter 3, The Gathering Storm and the First Glimpse. The drive home with Lila felt like steering a tiny boat through thick soup. The sky had turned a bruised black, and the rain wasn't falling, it was lashing, driven sideways by winds that screamed down the empty city streets. Jada gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Her little car shuddered under the sheer force of the storm. Lila, bless her heart, was utterly unfazed. She sat in the back, tracing the condensation on the window with her finger. Look, Mommy! The wind is fighting the buildings. It's making the rain dance. Jada's heart skipped. She didn't know what scared her more, the real danger of the Category 3 winds, or Lila's innocent, open wonder at the chaos. This was exactly why Jada needed control. The world was a mess of unpredictable variables, her life couldn't afford poetic wonder. It's just the weather, sweetheart. Science, Jada said, though her voice lacked conviction. As the sky darkened, the power lines along their route began to spark. Just like that, a branch, thick as a grown man's torso, snapped and crashed into the street 10 feet in front of them. Jada slammed on the brakes, her chest aching with the sudden spike of adrenaline. See? Lila said quietly, her small voice cutting through the roar of the wind. The city always wins, Mommy. The light pole is still standing. That night, Jada was forced to admit the storm wasn't an exaggeration, it was a beast. Before she could move the car around the debris, the scene outside changed entirely. Through the curtain of rain, just ahead, near the alleyway that backed up to her clinic, a massive shape stumbled out of the darkness. It was an animal, impossibly large, moving with a staggering, desperate urgency. It was a wolf, but it was the size of a small bear, its coat the deepest, shiniest black she had ever seen. Its fur looked like polished obsidian against the neon reflection of the streetlights. Jada's veterinary mind immediately went into assessment mode, momentarily overriding her fear. Without warning, the animal collapsed onto the pavement. It wasn't hit by a car, it was dying. And as its massive body settled, Jada saw it. Tucked beneath its front paw, barely visible, was a small, bundled shape. A beat later, the rain momentarily eased, and Jada saw a flash of silver-tipped fur on the large wolf's muzzle and the impossible, intelligent gold of its eyes before they slipped shut. The creature was wounded, bleeding heavily from its side, and its breathing was shallow. "Mommy, look at the big doggy," Lila whispered, captivated. Jada didn't answer. Her life of structure, science, and control had just been obliterated by a primal, mystical reality. The initial problem had fully emerged. The choice was clear: drive past and let the animal and its baby die, or risk everything, her career, her freedom, Lila's stability, to save them. As if summoned, the creature's faint whimpering reached her. As the silence stretched, Jada put the car in park, the decision already made because her deepest, most protective instinct as a healer and a mother had been activated. Chapter 4: The Unseen Cargo, The Transition. Jada moved on pure adrenaline, telling Lila to stay locked in the car. The rain was cold and sharp against her skin as she ran to the massive, black creature. Her heart pounded so loudly it matched the thunder rumbling overhead. The wolf's wound was massive, deep, and looked oddly clean, not jagged like an animal attack. It was too precise. At that moment, Jada saw the tiny bundle. It was a still infant pup, wrapped in a scrap of dark, expensive-looking fabric, entirely unconscious. She checked its pulse, weak but present. The pup was unnaturally small and vulnerable against the sheer bulk of the dying alpha. She gently lifted the infant, tucking it securely under her jacket. This was the second major open loop. The pup had been separated from Ronan, and Borean/the antagonist had clearly failed to eliminate it before Ronan collapsed. The danger was immediately exponential. She knelt beside the giant wolf. She couldn't leave him. She let it happen, the immediate, overwhelming, maternal need to protect the wounded. This was no ordinary animal. This was the Alpha King. "Okay, big guy," Jada breathed, her voice shaking slightly for the first time. "We're doing this the hard way, because there is no safe, easy, or legal way to explain to you." Before she could move a muscle, she heard a new sound, the distant wail of a police siren, cut short by the storm's noise, but undeniably there. She looked at her clinic door, just 20 yards away. It was a fortress of sterility and rules. She looked back at the dying wolf and the warm weight of the infant pup against her chest. What's worse, she realized she couldn't call Marcus. No one could know. Her world tilted away from reality and into myth. She grabbed the wolf by the scruff of his neck, his thick fur shockingly warm despite the rain, and began the impossible task of dragging a half-ton beast to the safety of her closed clinic. The emotional core was the risk. She was risking her life's work, Lila's stability, and her freedom on a primal instinct. The scientific initial goal of stability was now dead. Her new immediate goal was simple: keep them alive and hidden. As the wind shifted, carrying the distinct, unsettling scent of wet dog and something ancient and metallic, blood and magic, Jada pulled Ronan's massive body across the pavement. She knew, with chilling certainty, that her life as she knew it was over. Chapter 5: The Human Secret. The clinic's back room felt like an operating theater during a catastrophic emergency. Jada's body moved on instinct, fueled by the cold fear of what she had done. The gigantic black wolf was sprawled on her largest animal gurney, nearly sliding off, his thick fur soaked with rain and blood. The scent of copper and decay was overwhelming, a smell utterly different from the mundane diseases she normally treated. "You are going to need a miracle, big guy," Jada whispered, her voice tight. She worked swiftly, her veterinarian training a shield against the sheer absurdity of the situation. She didn't know what scared her more, the wolf's size, or the fact that the pup, cradled in a spare towel inside a sterile incubator, was too quiet. The wound on Ronan's flank wasn't just deep, the edges of the tissue were blackened, necrotic, and not healing. This wasn't a claw mark or a bullet, it looked like a chemical burn, yet it was impossibly precise. As the truth unraveled in her mind, Jada realized she wasn't treating a wild animal. She was treating a military-grade toxin, because nothing natural could cause this level of cellular death so rapidly while leaving the surrounding muscle intact. With every heartbeat, she pumped fluids and antibiotics into the massive creature, ignoring the tiny voice in her head screaming that this was felony animal abuse, maybe even domestic terrorism given the wolf's size. Instead, her mind focused on the pup. The tiny thing was breathing, but shallowly. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get his temperature stable. Meanwhile, outside the sealed clinic doors, the storm was receding, but the threat felt closer now. Jada checked her phone, no service. The power was out in the neighborhood, which was good for anonymity, but terrifying for her incubator. She had 24 hours of battery life, then the pup was at risk. As the silence stretched, Jada leaned against the wall, rubbing her temples. Her world tilted when she looked at the gigantic wolf's chest, watching the slow, agonizing rise and fall. Maybe it was fate, the kind of chaotic event that breaks a person, or the kind that rebuilds them stronger. She didn't know what scared her more, getting caught, or failing to save this impossible, beautiful beast and his heir. She was locked into the conflict now, no turning back. The tension broke when a weak, rattling sound came from the wolf. His enormous head shifted slightly toward the incubator. Even dying, the alpha knew where his child was. Chapter 6: The Confrontation. The air changed. The thick, feral scent of the wolf vanished, replaced by something sharp, metallic, and male, the sudden, impossible smell of ozone and wet leather. Jada, dozing fitfully on a folding chair, bolted upright. The gurney was empty. Standing where the massive wolf had been was a man. Ronan Varen. He was impossibly tall, built like a sculpture carved from granite, and completely naked. His dark, water-matted hair framed a face of stark, punishing intensity. But the most terrifying thing wasn't his sheer size, it was his eyes. They were the same impossible molten gold she had seen through the rain. "Where is he?" Ronan's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, laced with suspicion and rage. He took a predatory step toward the incubator. "Human. You will tell me what you have done with my son, or I will tear this place apart." Jada's heart skipped. She wasn't an action hero, she was a 30-something single mother who specialized in neutering chihuahuas. Before she could move, her protective instinct kicked in, harder than any self-preservation. She put herself directly between Ronan and the incubator, holding a heavy metal tray like a useless shield. "You will not touch that child," Jada declared, her voice surprisingly steady, fueled by the memory of the helpless pup. "He is sick. Poisoned. I saved your life, and his, because I am a veterinarian, and he needed help. You will respect the boundaries of a medical facility, or you will find yourself in handcuffs faster than you shifted." Ronan stopped, his jaw tight. He studied her, his golden eyes blazing with contempt. As if the world narrowed to just the two of them, the raw power emanating from him pressed down on her like atmospheric pressure. "A veterinarian," Ronan scoffed. "You touched my son. You exposed yourself to a royal secret. I should silence you now. What kind of trick is this? Did Borean send you to finish the job?" "Borean means nothing to me," Jada retorted, stepping closer despite the terror. That's why she was still standing. "I risk prison for you. I risk losing my daughter because I do not abandon the sick. You are the Alpha King Ronan, aren't you? You came in here dying of a wound that looks like highly specialized venom. If you kill me, who takes care of the pup? Your unbreakable will can't run an incubator. Your absolute loyalty can't measure dosage. Her clinical, simple truth hit him like a physical blow. Ronan's terrifying intensity wavered. He saw the faint monitors, the sterile equipment, the evidence of medical competence, and the unyielding fire in her eyes. The tension broke, and his shoulders slumped slightly, the raw, wounded king replacing the enraged predator. Which meant he was forced to listen. Ronan glanced at his side, seeing the freshly stapled, still blackened wound. He realized he was powerless. Chapter 7: The Forced Covenant. Ronan felt the helplessness like a cold shackle. He was a king, yet he stood naked and reliant on a fragile human whose scent was already starting to penetrate his hypersensitive guard. Still, her words were true, he was a liability, and she had expertise. Just like that, everything changed when a sudden, high-pitched cry sliced through the room. The pup was seizing, tiny limbs jerking violently against the blankets. Secondary venom effects. Ronan lunged, his paternal instinct overwhelming his political fear. He snatched the pup, holding him close, trying to soothe him with a low, rumbling growl deep in his chest. It didn't work. The pup's condition worsened instantly, the seizure intensifying. Ronan looked up, horrified, then down at the pup, whose skin was turning faintly blue. But then, Jada acted. Her body moved on instinct. She reached across Ronan's arms, gently taking the infant. She didn't use medicine, she simply held the small creature against the cotton of her shirt, rocking softly, murmuring mundane, human words. The space between them burned with the sheer intensity of the life and death struggle. And just like that, everything changed. The seizure stopped. The pup went instantly slack, breathing the evening out against Jada's skin. Ronan stared. His mind, trained in ancient shifter mythology and combat, utterly failed to process this. He could practically smell the safety emanating from her skin, a strange, soft, steady energy his son's poisoned body craved. As if pulled by a string, Ronan moved closer, needing to confirm the anomaly. As the bond pulsed between the pup and the human, Ronan felt a faint, stabilizing echo himself. "What did you do?" Ronan demanded, the rage replaced by sheer confusion. Jada's eyes, tired but triumphant, met his. "I did nothing. Your son is highly susceptible to this poison, but something about my presence, my basic human stability, perhaps, counters the side effects. He needs to be near me, Ronan. All the time, because he is going to die without this stability." More importantly, Jada's words were the absolute truth. Ronan's last defenses crumbled. This was the ultimate humiliation, the ultimate sacrifice of control. His alpha king heir was dependent on a human scent. "I need to get Lila from the car," Jada stated, keeping her voice even. "We can't stay here. The fire department will be investigating the downed lines outside. We went home. Now. It's the only place big enough to hide you, because it's so completely ordinary." Ronan looked at the pup nestled against Jada's collarbone. He looked at his blackened wound. He looked at the shattered remains of his old life. He had been thrust into a new reality, and his only way out was to trust the very human he had sworn to distrust. Without another word, Ronan simply nodded, a slow, grudging acceptance of his fate. The king had entered the sanctuary. Chapter 8: The Closet King. The air in Jada's apartment was aggressively normal. It smelled like detergent, old textbooks, and the faint, sweet scent of the small human child, Lila. For Ronan, who was accustomed to the vast, cold emptiness of a mountain fortress, the space was suffocating. He was currently confined to the small, dark laundry closet, forced to sit with his knees pulled to his chest. As the silence roared in his ears, every mundane sound, a neighbor's television, the gurgle of pipes, the soft tapping of Lila's tiny feet in the next room, felt like a thunderclap. "You have to stay absolutely still, Ronan," Jada whispered, her voice barely audible through the thin wood of the door. "Lila thinks you're a very large, injured pet, a wolf dog we're fostering from the clinic. The moment she hears you, she will try to feed you cookies." Ronan's heart skipped. Cookies. This was his new reality. A king, wounded by ancient venom, hiding from a ruthless political assassin, trapped by a 9-year-old's confectionery curiosity. He hated it. Because of that, the rage in his chest felt thick and unmanageable, a low, constant growl he had to swallow back down. In the echo of his voice, the memory of him giving commands to Tyran, the humiliation was acute. After that, Jada gave him his first order. "We need to move you and the pup tonight. The pup is stable, but he needs less antiseptic air. We'll move you into the walk-in pantry. It's slightly bigger. You must be silent during the human routines. School drop-off is in 2 hours." Ronan scoffed silently. School drop-off. He had faced armies with less dread than he felt facing the sheer banality of Jada's life. Yet, he couldn't argue, because the pup, now resting in his arms, was thriving only because of Jada's proximity and care. The tiny, precious weight of his son was the only thing grounding him. Meanwhile, Ronan attempted to use the encrypted channel on his small, hidden phone, a piece of shifter technology disguised as a cheap wrist calculator, to contact the few safe contacts Tyran had given him. He needed intelligence. He needed to know who Borean was talking to. Not only that, but he needed to confirm the fate of his loyal pack. His focus was rigid, driven by his core strength, unbreakable will. With his scent in the air, the pup let out a small, contented sigh. Ronan looked at Jada, seeing her move through her morning routine with the graceful, efficient exhaustion of a woman juggling too much. He saw her strength wasn't brute force, it was the ability to keep the chaos contained. She felt it, clear as day, the enormous, volatile creature taking up space in her small world. This was the most effective prison he had ever known. Chapter 9, The Unmasking. The inevitable clash happened that afternoon. Jada had returned from work, utterly drained, and found Ronan standing in the tiny hallway, having attempted to fix a broken cabinet door with brute force instead of a screwdriver. The door was splintered, a clear breach of the sanctuary's anonymity. "I was securing the latch," Ronan explained stiffly, trying to use his alpha tone, deep and authoritative. Jada didn't flinch. She simply crossed her arms. "That's not secure, Ronan. That's vandalism. You are in the human world now. You have to learn how to operate the way humans operate, because power, even yours, attracts attention here." "I am the Alpha King," Ronan growled low in his chest, the sound of a warning. "I do not dismantle furniture with tools designed for children." As the tension broke, his patience snapped. He was used to instant obedience. On the other hand, Jada's eyes narrowed, showing a flash of pure maternal fury. "You are an injured guest in my home, protecting a vulnerable child who is sick and dependent on me. You are currently only a threat to my mortgage, which means I am the only authority here. If you cannot stop trying to solve every problem with a hammer, you will jeopardize Lila and the pup. Is that clear?" The raw clarity of her words hit him. He was losing. He was failing his primary goal because of his adherence to old, outdated methods. Ronan's instincts surged. He used his heightened senses, not for hunting, but for learning. He focused on the sounds, smells, and textures of the apartment. With a single glance, he mapped the air currents, the squeak of the floorboards under the loose carpet, the exact rhythm of the neighbor's heavy footsteps. He started to understand the physics of silence and blending in. In the quiet that followed, Ronan reluctantly picked up the splintered wood, gathering it into a neat pile. "I understand. Show me the tool," he conceded, the surrender tasting like dust. His transformation from point A to point B had begun. He was trading control for adaptation. Jada, surprised by his compliance, handed him a simple screwdriver. "It's called necessity, Ronan. Not a weakness. Your way got you poisoned. My way keeps us hidden." From there, Ronan spent the evening meticulously observing Jada and Lila. He learned the rhythm of the city, the hours of quiet, and the sound of the Main Street bus. What's worse was that he found himself captivated by Lila's innocent confidence and Jada's tireless, pragmatic care. His bones remembered him as the ruler, but his soul answered to the protector. Chapter 10: The First Sniff. The city was wet and muffled by midnight fog. Ronan, disguised in a hood and a large, ill-fitting jacket Jada had found, moved silently through the back alleys near the closed clinic. He couldn't risk shifting, but his senses, even dulled by the poison, were sharp enough to slice through the human smells of pizza and diesel. He was looking for any sign of Borean's reach. He had to find Borean, because the longer the assassin was free, the higher the risk to the pack and to Jada. He reached the alley where Jada had found him. The air here was dead, clean of shifter traces, scrubbed by the storm. Ronan leaned against the cool brick wall of the clinic. The wind carried his name only in his own strained breathing. But then, he caught it, a faint, lingering trace. Not Borean himself, but a subordinate. The scent was masked with synthetic human odors, trying to appear like a mundane, late-night delivery driver, but Ronan knew the unique, sharp scent of his own pack's lower-ranking beta lineage. A growl rose in his throat, muted, internal, but ferocious. The shifter had been here recently. Within the last few hours. As if the forest watched, Ronan followed the ghost trail down the block, using his superior sight to find where the scent faded, a large, empty commercial parking lot. Moments later, Ronan found a single, discarded cigarette butt, a high-end brand favored by those who frequented the old pack territories. This was a crucial subhook and plot twist. The antagonist wasn't searching randomly, they were tracking specific clues, meaning they knew Ronan hadn't escaped the city. Ronan crushed the cigarette butt under his heel. The assassin was hunting in the periphery, testing the boundaries. He hadn't just put Jada in danger, he had led the danger right to her door. His emotional state was intense drama, fear and furious self-reproach. Her world tilted with every moment he remained. Ronan rushed back to the apartment, the silence of the city suddenly terrifying. He had to warn Jada. He had to prepare her for the fact that the next attack would be aimed not at the king, but at the vulnerable human shield protecting him. Chapter 11: The Confirmed Betrayal. The message arrived just before dawn, flashing in red on the tiny screen of Ronan's disguised communication device. It wasn't a long message, it was a single, cryptic image, a silver ring bearing the ancient crest of the Elder Council. That crest belonged to Borean. The man Ronan had trusted since childhood. Ronan's hands, gripping the small device, shook violently. The revelation wasn't a shock, it was a physical blow. Fury propels Ronan from the small pantry, forcing him to pace the narrow length of Jada's apartment. His heart pounded so loudly it threatened to wake Lila. Deep down, he knew the truth. Borean hadn't just betrayed the crown, Borean had exploited Ronan's fundamental flaw, his absolute reliance on political control and his refusal to tolerate vulnerability. Between them, something cracked, the last remnant of Ronan's belief that he could handle this alone. He had to tell Jada. He found Jada in the kitchen, silently preparing Lila's lunch, her face marked by the exhaustion of her double life. "The hunter is my former beta, Borean," Ronan stated without preamble, his voice guttural and raw. Jada stopped slicing the bread, but didn't look up immediately. As the silence stretched, she slowly placed the knife down. And what does a former beta mean? Does he have an army waiting outside my clinic? He has the loyalty of the Elder Council and several dozen high-ranking shifters who believe my isolated reign was a failure, Ronan explained, speaking in short, clipped sentences to manage the consuming rage. Borean is not a warrior, he is a politician. That's why he relies on poison and strategy, not a frontal assault. He is tracking me, because the pup is the only one who can legally challenge his ascent. She felt it, clear as day, the crushing weight of the hidden war settling over her kitchen. Jada finally turned, her expression guarded. So, why target me? Why was his subordinate watching my alley, not the city's shifted territory? Ronan had to swallow his pride to deliver the final, painful truth. He knows the child is alive, but he suspects the pup is dependent on something. Something outside of our magic. He is targeting you, Jada. Your life. Your stability. To make things worse, he will use the predictable human element to smoke us out. This is no longer a search, it is a declaration of war on your sanctuary. Jada's eyes flashed with a cold, protective fire. Her instincts surged, and she didn't seem scared, but focused. Ronan realized her composure wasn't professional, it was maternal. Then we changed the plan. We don't hide. We built a trap. Chapter 12, The Midpoint Shift, Fire and Fury. Ronan was on edge all afternoon. He was trying to figure out how Borean could hit them next. But then, the danger arrived with the shrill, cutting sound of the city fire alarm, a sound Jada had trained him to recognize as the ultimate threat. He was instantly on his feet, his human form taut with primal aggression. A beat later, the smell hit him, a sharp, acrid blend of burning plastic and electrical wire, coming from the utility closet just outside their main door. Borean's test. They hit the service wiring, Jada yelled over the siren's initial chirp, already moving toward the sink. It's small and targeted, designed to force an evacuation or call the fire department. If we evacuate, we're exposed. If they come, we're caught. Which meant we solve this ourselves, now. Ronan's wolf pressed forward, the desire to rip the wall apart overwhelming. Before he could move, Jada slammed a fire extinguisher into his hands. No brute force, Ronan. Controlled, silent destruction. Ronan hated the fragile metal in his hands. He wanted to rage, to fight, but Jada was already pointing at the laundry room vent, their only access point to the small, targeted blaze. Because of that, he focused his superhuman strength into surgical precision. He ripped the metal vent cover free, not with a roar, but with a horrifying, calculated whine of metal. The smoke rushed in, choking in toxic. Ronan gagged, his powerful lungs rebelling against the industrial poison. At that moment, as his body faltered, Jada didn't shout commands. She grabbed his jacket and pulled him down toward her chest, using her body as a shield against the rising smoke while aiming the extinguisher. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, from the heat and the exertion, she held Ronan steady, her touch the only calm anchor in the chaos. Ronan fired the extinguisher into the hole. The blaze died instantly. Just like that, the siren stopped, replaced by the silence of the emergency averted. Ronan stared at Jada, soot smeared across her determined face. The midpoint shift was complete. He had won the battle only because he had trusted her human knowledge and accepted his physical vulnerability. We covered it up, Jada gasped, leaning on the wall, her hands trembling. But that was not a warning, Ronan. That was a declaration. They know exactly where we are. Chapter 13 New Direction. The air was finally clean, but the apartment felt permanently scarred. Jada watched Ronan, no longer the Alpha King, but a massive man struggling to repair the damaged drywall using the pathetic kit she kept under the bathroom sink. He was furious at the task, yet meticulously precise, because he knew the tiniest mistake could expose them. "You're doing this perfectly," Jada murmured, handing him a clean rag. "The mundane is your best weapon right now." Ronan slammed the small spackle tub down, frustration boiling in his golden eyes. In the quiet that followed, he finally spoke. "They almost caught us, Jada. They will not send fire next time. They will send shifters. We need to leave the city." Jada shook her head, a stubborn set to her jaw. "No. Running is what Borean expects. He knows the shifter territories. We fight here." She pulled out a map of the city, not a typical street map, but one marked with subtle notations from the clinic's network of contacts. "Your beta, Borean, is a politician. He deals in resources and money. He needs a human front to move his resources without detection." She felt it, clear as day, the instinct to hunt. "I found this." She pointed to a section of the city near the docks, an area of high-foot traffic and old warehouses. "It's a shell corporation that appeared 6 months ago, a high-end, unmarked storage facility. It's too expensive for a warehouse and too private for an office. Not only that, but several of his known human contacts have visited it frequently." Ronan's eyes widened, recognizing the strategy, using the human world's complexity as cover. With a single glance, he realized the true significance of her discovery. Borean was hiding in plain sight, using the complexity of the city she understood. That is where he directs the search. That is the weak point, Ronan acknowledged, his voice softening, a profound respect entering his tone. He is relying on my inability to see the human infrastructure. As if summoned, Jada had provided the exact solution. "We go on the attack," Jada confirmed. "But not with claws and fury. We draw him out, into the open, using the one thing he knows you value more than the crown, your heir." Ronan looked at the small, fragile pup sleeping soundly in a bassinet beside them, his life dependent on the gentle human scent nearby. He looked at Jada, the terrified mother and doctor who had become his strategist. The direction was new, terrifying, and completely against his alpha nature, but it was the only path to safety. As the bond pulsed between the two of them, Ronan nodded, accepting the impossible. The king would use vulnerability as his greatest weapon. Chapter 14: The Domestic Vulnerability. The night after the fire was surprisingly quiet, a deceptive calm. Ronan sat cross-legged on the floor of the pantry, watching Jada feed his son with a tiny dropper. Lila was asleep, the rhythmic creak of the aging house the only sound. In the stillness that followed the feeding, Jada leaned back against the wall, utterly exhausted. Ronan looked at her. Her face, usually so composed and sharp, was soft now, showing the cost of her endless effort. He realized with terrifying clarity that his kingdom, his life, and his son's future depended entirely on this tired, resilient human woman. "I had a sister, Alara," Ronan murmured, the words rusty from disuse. He hadn't spoken about his family in years. This was a relevant story that created emotional investment, showcasing vulnerability. "When I took the crown, she begged me not to become what my father was, isolated, consumed by duty. I listened to no one. I pushed away every loyalist who showed sentiment. Because I believed sentiment was a weakness that would be exploited by our enemies." Jada's eyes, the color of moss in the dim light, were fixed on him. "You thought control was safety." "It was," Ronan agreed, his voice thick with shame. "But my control created Borean. He used my rigidity against me. He knew I would dismiss compassion as a viable defense. And just like that, everything changed. I was poisoned by a man who once swore loyalty, and now I am saved by a woman who swore no oaths at all." The space between them burned, thick with unspoken longing and shared trauma. Ronan looked at the pup, then back at Jada. With every heartbeat, he felt the protective instinct shift. It was no longer just for his heir, but for Jada too. Her body moved on instinct as she reached out, not to touch him, but to gently wipe a tear she hadn't known was there. "You're not isolated here, Ronan," Jada whispered, her voice husky. "Here, you're just a father who is wounded. And I am just the person who helps." As the bond pulsed, Ronan reached out and covered her hand with his skin rough against her soft, competent palm. He held it tightly, anchoring himself to her warmth. As if fate demanded it, their roles were reversed. The king was reliant on the healer. This was their point of no return. Chapter 15. The trap is set. Ronan had to act. He acted on new knowledge/resolve from the midpoint, taking a bigger risk. Using Jada's map and his remaining encrypted device, Ronan established contact with his last known loyal operative, a shifter named Torvin, instructing him to investigate the dockside storage facility Jada had identified. Soon after, Ronan met Torvin in a crowded, noisy human market, a place Torvin, accustomed to quiet forests, clearly hated. Ronan's goal: confirm the location and secure evidence against Borean. His emotional state: driven, but overconfident in his ability to read Borean's strategy. "The facility is Borean's nerve center," Torvin confirmed, his voice vibrating with anger. "But it's too clean, my king. No sign of shifters, just humans running boxes." Not only that, but Torvin looked pale, his movements slightly sluggish. Ronan's heightened senses caught the metallic tang of fear beneath Torvin's typical earth scent. "You've been compromised," Ronan stated, his voice dangerously low. Her voice trembled as Jada had warned him. Borean was strategic, not brute force. "No, my king, I swear," Torvin started, but he never finished the sentence. Without warning, a plain white van screeched to a halt beside them. Before Ronan could react, 3 large, powerful humans, mercenaries, not shifters, dressed in dark clothing, leapt out and expertly subdued Torvin using a chemical spray that dropped the loyalist instantly. What followed was a terrifying tableau. The humans were fast, silent, and efficient. They were working for Borean, using human resources to avoid detection by the city's minimal shifter enforcement. Ronan stood frozen, masked by the frantic human chaos created by the sudden ambush. He was forced to retreat, because if he shifted, he would lose Torvin and expose the existence of shifters to the entire crowd. His consequences of commitment were brutal. His plan failed spectacularly. His chest ached with the raw pain of losing his last loyal connection. He failed to save his friend, and the enemy now had more leverage. Chapter 16. The critical juncture. Jada knew the moment Ronan returned that the mission had failed. He didn't have to say a word. He looked like a man who had faced the executioner and lost his soul instead of his life. He was breathing heavily, a faint wound bleeding through his borrowed jacket. "Torvin is gone," Ronan choked out, leaning against the doorframe, his golden eyes filled with self-loathing. "Borean used human mercenaries. He knows how I think. He knows I rely on the pack." Her voice trembled with contained anxiety, yet her actions were swift. Jada immediately pulled out the medical kit. "Sit down. Let me see that." But then, Ronan ignored her. He was staring past her, toward the table where Lila had left her favorite book, a worn, glitter-covered copy of Little Red Riding Hood. Jada followed his gaze. Lying right beside the book, placed neatly on top of Lila's homework, was a single, silver-tipped wolf hair. This was the final plot twist and emotional climax. Not a threat of fire, but a clear, silent message: "I have been inside your sanctuary. I know your child." Ronan's control snapped. He snatched the hair, crushing it in his fist. "I brought this to you. I brought death to your child. He is not targeting me, he is targeting my vulnerability, my reliance on you." Her heart skipped a beat as the terror became visceral. Before either could speak, Ronan turned to Jada, desperate. You have to take Lila and run. Tonight. To a place where there are no shifters. I will draw Borean out, alone. This is the sacrificial separation, the only way to save you. Jada stepped forward, touching his soot-stained cheek. She felt the intensity of his fear for her. My fear is real, Ronan. But running is what I used to do. Running is control. We are past that, because now we fight. She looked down at the tiny wolf hair, then up into his desperate eyes. The lair is the storage facility. He thinks he's safe among the humans. We use the pup as bait, but we fight on my ground. In the city. As if summoned, our only hope is this risky, dangerous plan. As the air thickened with resolve and unspoken love, Ronan nodded, his decision made. The final confrontation was imminent. They had crossed the point of no return and were fully committed to the path of maximum risk. Chapter 17, The Fatal Flaw. The dockside air was thick with salt and machine oil, and Ronan hated the smell. It masked the sense of danger. He was hiding in the shadows of a massive shipping container, waiting. Jada, with Lila safely tucked away with Marcus, under a flimsy excuse, was positioned in a nearby abandoned guard booth, acting as his eyes and ears. They were using the pup's blanket, doused in the calming human immunity scent, as bait near the warehouse entrance. Ronan's goal: lure a low-level mercenary, gain information, and escape. His emotional state: focused, driven, but plagued by a sense of foreboding. They're coming, Ronan, Jada whispered through the tiny earpiece she'd borrowed from the clinic. 3 men. Not shifters. Moving like a military unit. They're going straight for the blanket. With every step he took toward the unsuspecting mercenaries, Ronan felt a grim determination. He acted on new knowledge/resolve, trusting Jada's human world surveillance over his shifter senses. But then, as Ronan lunged from the shadows, a blur of desperate speed, remaining in human form to avoid immediate exposure, a voice, amplified and cold, sliced through the night air. Welcome to the human world, Ronan, came the voice of Borean over hidden loudspeakers. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate the protective retreat? Because I know your flaw. You will always prioritize the rescue over the confrontation. What followed was chaos. Borean hadn't sent 3 mercenaries, he had staged a perimeter. Without warning, sonic emitters mounted high on the shipping containers activated, blasting a frequency that ripped through Ronan's shifter senses like broken glass. The pain was immediate, crippling, and targeted. Ronan collapsed, clutching his head, his vision blurring as the world dissolved into pure agony. His world tilted, utterly defenseless. The king is down. Engage capture protocols. Borean's voice commanded. As if pulled by a string, Ronan heard Jada's frantic, desperate cry through the earpiece. Ronan! Get out! I can't reach you. At that moment, as the mercenaries closed in, Ronan forced himself to roll, shoving his last emergency tool, a tiny, powerful shifter EMP device, under the container. He didn't use it to fight, he used it for sabotage. He triggered it, hoping to fry Borean's communications system. Then, the mercenaries were on him, using nets woven with silver strands, the metal burning his skin. His agony was complete. The final plan had backfired spectacularly, confirming Borean had anticipated every move. Chapter 18, The Loss of the King. Jada watched the horrific scene unfold on the tiny, grainy thermal screen in the guard booth. She saw Ronan's powerful form instantly immobilized by the sonic blast, a sight that ripped the breath from her lungs. Ronan! Answer me, she hissed into the comms, but all she heard was static, the successful result of his EMP, but a devastating loss of their lifeline. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the nearby truck engine starting up, Borean's extraction vehicle. She felt it, clear as day, a cold, sickening dread spreading through her chest. This wasn't a setback, this was total defeat. On the other hand, she knew she couldn't rush in. Her presence, a scared human with a wrench, would only guarantee her capture, Lila's exposure, and the pup's death. Her body moved on instinct, but this time it was the primal, non-negotiable instinct of a mother protecting her child. Lila. That was her only remaining mission. That's why Jada slipped out of the booth, the cold night air a stark reminder of her isolation. She ran toward the main street, abandoning the scene of the capture. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of Ronan suffering Borean's vengeance, or the crushing, absolute silence of the empty streets now that she was completely alone. More importantly, she realized she had nothing left, no Alpha King, no shifter technology, and no plan beyond the need to survive the night. What's worse, she was now running directly into the path of Borean's men, who knew her face and the address of her home. In the stillness that followed, Jada stumbled into an alleyway, pulling out her phone. No signal. She was cut off. She had lost the king. She was utterly alone, facing a powerful, organized shifter enemy with only her vet knowledge and her broken car. This was her major setback. Chapter 19: The Dark Night of the Soul. Jada managed to reach her apartment through back streets, moving like a ghost. Her voice trembled as she woke Lila and the pup. She dressed Lila swiftly, silently, stuffing essentials into a backpack, not money, not clothes, but medical supplies and Lila's favorite stuffed bunny. She looked around the sterile, orderly apartment, her sanctuary, and saw it for what it truly was, a fragile paper shield. Her rigid control, the life she had painstakingly built to protect Lila from chaos, had invited the most brutal chaos imaginable. As the truth unraveled, Jada held the pup tightly. He was sleeping, his tiny face nestled into her neck, stabilized only by her scent. She thought of Ronan, captured, hurt, sacrificed. Her chest ached with a searing grief she hadn't earned, yet couldn't deny. A rhetorical question prompted reflection: had her love for order actually caused this destruction? Deep down, she knew the truth. She had judged Ronan's life as reckless, yet her attempt to save him had made her own life equally so. Love was the opposite of control. "We have to go now, Mommy," Lila whispered, sensing the immense, suffocating fear. "I hear something." But then, Jada heard it too, a faint, scratching sound at the back window. Borean's cleanup crew. She felt it, clear as day, utter, cold despair. The goal seemed impossible. She was cornered. She had failed to save Ronan, and now she was about to fail Lila. She looked at the terrified innocence in Lila's eyes. Her soul answered with one last surge of desperate determination. Maybe it was fate, but Jada realized Borean was still relying on her running. She wouldn't run. Jada grabbed a heavy, antique mortar and pestle from the shelf, a symbol of the life she was leaving. She knew she had to embrace the mess, the chaos, the survival over control. "We're not leaving through the front door, sweetie," Jada whispered, pushing the mortar into Lila's hands, a promise of a fight. "We're going to surprise them." As the air thickened with the immediate threat, Jada knew this was the lowest point. Ronan was gone. Her home was compromised. But the dark night of the soul was over. She was defeated, but she was not dead. And now, she fought without rules. Chapter 20: The Unexpected Ally. Jada was hiding in the damp, cold basement of the city's Edge veterinary clinic, the one place Borean would think too exposed to check. She was sitting on an overturned bucket, holding Lila close, listening to the heavy rain outside, a sound that, for once, didn't sound like a monster. In the stillness that followed the chaos of the night, Jada felt the terrible weight of Ronan's sacrifice. He was gone, captured by the very weakness he had tried to correct, his protective instinct. She had to find him, because she couldn't live with the silence of her own failure. She looked at the small, dark piece of fabric that was the pup's blanket. It was soaked in Ronan's unique, earthy alpha scent and Jada's calming human scent. As the silence stretched, Jada ran her thumb along the edge of the blanket, noting the unusual stitching. This was the turning point from despair. But then, her fingers caught on something stiff, almost metallic, hidden within the lining. She carefully ripped the seam. Inside wasn't a chip or a bomb, it was a thin, flexible piece of paper, folded multiple times. Ronan's final, silent message, hidden in the one thing he knew Borean wouldn't touch, his heir's security. The paper wasn't a map, it was a complex series of chemical formulas and coordinates. Ronan's goal was to ensure she had the information. Her thoughts spun trying to make sense of the strange symbols. Not only that, but the note contained a simple line, written in a cramped, hurried script: "The child's stabilizing scent is not accidental. It is a beacon. Use it to find the heart of the pack." Ronan. Jada gasped. The calming human immunity wasn't just a passive defense, it was an active resource. Ronan knew his pack used certain ancient scents in their hierarchy. The pup's blanket was now chemically infused with her human scent, making it an untraceable, invisible marker that the other shifters couldn't identify, yet one she could now use. As the bond pulsed with renewed purpose, Jada realized the coordinates led not to a shifter territory, but to an abandoned, ancient tunnel system beneath the city, a legendary piece of the werewolf world's mythology used for emergency transport. Her voice trembled with determination as she looked at Lila, now sleeping peacefully despite the danger. Maybe it was fate, but Jada wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. Chapter 21, The Human Plan. Jada worked with surgical focus, her control finally returning, but this time, it was control married to purpose, not fear. She was formulating the final plan. First, Lila. Jada contacted Marcus, her loyal assistant, sending him to a distant friend's house in the suburbs with Lila and the pup. She fabricated an emergency veterinary transport trip, because she needed Lila to be truly safe, far away from the city's shifting elements. Next, the resources. Jada gathered what a desperate human would need: vials of potent animal sedative, enough to drop an elephant, or a powerful alpha, a high-powered tranquilizer rifle, hidden since her last bear-baiting job years ago, and a map of the city's forgotten sub-level utility tunnels. She felt it, clear as day, she had everything she needed. She had to get to that ancient tunnel system. It was a dangerous, disgusting crawl through sewage and forgotten history, but it led directly beneath the dockside warehouse, Borean's hidden lair. She didn't know what scared her more, climbing through tunnels or facing a dozen armed mercenaries and an alpha assassin. But as if the forest watched, she knew the only way to save Ronan and destroy Borean's network was to hit them where they felt safest. With every heartbeat, Jada checked the tranquilizer rifle's pressure gauge. The only way she could get close to Ronan was if he wasn't resisting. Her plan was simple: disrupt, inject, and drag. That's why Jada stared at the tranquilizer vials. She was about to use her skills not to heal, but to disable a king. She had to overcome a final internal hurdle. Was she capable of this violence? Yes. Because the pup and Ronan deserved to live, and Borean had crossed the line when he threatened Lila. As the bond pulsed with a ferocious resolve, Jada left the clinic and walked into the streets, a small woman carrying a large backpack, ready to wage war on a hidden kingdom. Chapter 22: The Approach. The air in the maintenance tunnels was thick, hot, and smelled of rust and stagnation. Jada was moving on her hands and knees, the sound of her own breath amplified by the concrete echoes. The coordinates Ronan had given her were precise, leading her deeper into the city's forgotten circulatory system. Even so, the journey was grueling. She had to navigate abandoned railway lines and treacherous drops, using her small flashlight to cut through the oppressive darkness. Between one breath and the next, she almost slipped on a moss-covered railing, the rifle swinging precariously. She was executing the initial stages of the plan. Her world tilted with every near miss, but she pushed through, fueled by the image of Ronan's tormented face when he was captured. Meanwhile, above her, the dockside warehouse was humming with activity. Jada could hear the faint, rhythmic pounding of machinery, the sounds of Borean's criminal operation being run under the cover of the human world. To make things worse, she realized Borean wasn't just holding Ronan for ransom, he was extracting information. Ronan's alpha blood held secrets of power, lineage, and pack resources that Borean desperately needed. As fire bloomed beneath her skin from exertion and adrenaline, Jada found the section Ronan had marked, an old, corroded vent shaft leading directly up into the floor of the warehouse. She stopped beneath it, listening. She could hear voices above her now, harsh and demanding. And then, she heard a sound that froze her blood and intensified her resolve, a low, tortured whimper. Ronan. With a single glance at the vent shaft, Jada knew this was it. The point of direct confrontation was imminent. She was about to ascend from the sewers of the human world into the lair of the shifter politician. She took the tranquilizer rifle from her back, its cold metal a familiar, reassuring weight in her hands. The tension broke, not with sound, but with absolute silence. She was ready. Chapter 23 The Climax, The Human Weapon. The moment Jada breached the vent shaft, the noise hit her, loud, angry shouting and the metallic rasp of chains. She was in a high-bay storage room, the air cold and stale. Her eyes darted to the center of the room. Ronan was chained, kneeling, his body strained against silver-laced restraints. Borean stood over him, holding a wicked-looking electrified baton. Her heart skipped. This was the climax. Tell me the location of the reserves, Ronan. Or the human healer dies. Borean snarled, raising the baton. That's why Jada didn't hesitate. Her body moved on instinct. She raised the tranquilizer rifle, aimed not at Borean, but at the electronic panel controlling the overhead lighting. She fired the sedative dart. It hit the panel with a dull thwack. Without warning, the lights exploded in a shower of sparks. The sudden darkness plunged the warehouse into absolute chaos, broken only by the wail of the emergency generator kicking in. What followed was Jada's moment. She sprinted toward Ronan, using the industrial shelving for cover. Borean and his human mercenaries were momentarily disoriented, unable to see clearly in the flickering, weak backup light. More importantly, Jada reached Ronan. He was snarling, fighting the silver. His eyes, though pained, recognized her. Jada! No! Run! Before she could move, Jada whipped out a second, smaller dart, loaded with the potent animal sedative. She didn't have time to unlock the chains. She had to disable the king to save the king. I am so sorry, Ronan, she whispered, her voice raw. She had to save him, because she needed him alive, not heroic. She plunged the dart deep into his shoulder. The effect was instantaneous and brutal. Ronan's powerful muscles seized, then went instantly slack. His breathing turned shallow, the Alpha King completely incapacitated. His goal, peak intensity, all emotions, fighting the pain, fighting the sedative, fighting for her. Just like that, everything changed. Jada dropped the empty rifle, grabbed the heavy chains, and pulled Ronan's massive, limp body into the shadows. Borean, realizing the source of the attack, screamed her name, but Jada was already gone, dragging her king toward the safety of the maintenance tunnels. The human healer had defeated the Alpha Assassin. Chapter 24, Falling Action, The Surrender and the Threat. Ronan woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of soft humming, Jada's calming, human song. He was lying back on the veterinary gurney, his silver restraints gone, his wound bandaged with sterile gauze. He looked at Jada, who was sitting beside him, pale with exhaustion but fiercely resolute. She felt it, clear as day, the immense relief that he was alive. "You drugged me," Ronan stated, his voice raspy, a hint of awe mixing with the lingering shock of the sedative. "I saved you," Jada corrected, her eyes firm. "You were going to be tortured to death for information. My way was safer, because your brute strength was never going to win against an electrified net." As the echo faded, Ronan reached out, not to command, but to simply touch her hand. He accepted the consequences of the climax. "You embraced the mess, Jada. You used my weakness against my enemy. You used humanity as a weapon." His soul answered her resilience. "Borean?" "Gone," Jada confirmed, her face darkening. That's why she was still worried. "He escaped the ensuing chaos, but I put enough animal sedative into the warehouse's ventilation system to make his cleanup crew very sick. He won't be back tonight. To make things worse, we didn't eliminate his network. He has resources. He will rebuild." Meanwhile, the pup, now resting in the incubator, let out a soft, contented noise. Jada realized Ronan was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that cracked the facade of the Alpha King. "He won't stop, but he will fear you now," Ronan promised, his thumb tracing the lines of fatigue on her palm. He felt it, clear as day, the shift. He had been rescued by a human who saw him not as a king, but as a wounded father. His bones remembered him as the ruler, but his heart answered to this shared, desperate intimacy. Chapter 25, Resolution, A New Equilibrium. The sun rose, painting the clinic windows in stripes of gold, a stark contrast to the dark week they had endured. Jada was packing the pup's incubator, preparing to finally take him and Lila somewhere truly secure. Ronan, dressed in clothes she'd retrieved for him, simple, dark human clothes that made him look dangerous but ordinary, stood by the door, watching her. He was whole again, healed by her care. "I need to contact Tyran," Ronan stated, his voice now commanding, but softened by his gaze. "I will rule from exile for a time. I need to dismantle Borean's network piece by piece, because the threat to my son will never fully disappear while Borean lives." Before the words left her lips, Jada knew what he was going to say. He was going to leave. But then, Ronan stepped toward her, taking her hands in his. His golden eyes, steady and clear, held hers, a promise she hadn't dared to ask for. "I am the king, Jada. But the Alpha's primary duty is protection," Ronan murmured. "My son is only safe with your scent. I will not return to the mountain. My new equilibrium is here. My kingdom needs me to be safe, and my safety is you." As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Jada felt the immense power of his unconditional surrender. He was choosing her messy, vulnerable world. "I love your chaos, Jada Moreno," Ronan confessed, his voice dropping to a low, intimate growl. "Your bravery is more potent than any shifter magic. I want to build a life here, with you, in this impossible sanctuary." Jada's heart skipped. And she let it happen. She leaned into his embrace, inhaling his earthy, powerful scent, the scent of her king, her partner, her new life. "This is going to be messy, Ronan," she warned, smiling through sudden tears. "I wouldn't have it any other way, healer," he promised.